Chapter 1001 Apocalyptic Fumes. Yi-Yun looked at the silver-haired girl the moment she appeared. He wanted to know who she was. However, Yi-Yun did not recognize her at all. She was dressed in a watery green dress and she had smooth and fair skin. Her facial features made her resemble a figure that walked out of a painting, and her every movement felt graceful like an ephemeral existence. She was truly a peerless lady. However, the silver-haired girl's expression did not seem calm. It shattered the illusion that she was like a fairy from the 9 heavens who descended to the mortal world. "Shu-hee, come over here." Just as the silver-haired girl said that, boom! With a loud explosion, the ground began to quake violently. The mountains far away were beginning to crumble. In the black marsh, large black mud waves were being stirred and there was lava spewing up into the sky before landing on the marsh and burning the black mud. Who? Plumes of black miasma began emerging out of the marsh as it diffused everywhere. Apocalyptic fumes. This kind of situation only happens once every 300 years. Only 100 years has passed. The silver-haired girl's expression changed. The Azurewood Great World was on the brink of destruction and danger lurked at every turn. Even though she was a successor of the Azurewood Manor, she was helpless when it came to power on the scale of world destruction. All she could do was try her best to avoid the dangers. Through the monitoring of the Azurewood Great World's rate of destruction and various disasters that happened, the progeny of the Azurewood Manor had already reduced the phenomena into a certain set of patterns. Through these patterns, the silver-haired girl could act freely in the Azurewood Great World, but there were always accidents, such as the situation that they were presently in. It's the Array Formation. Those outsiders have destroyed the Azurewood Manor's protective array. The silver-haired girl let out a long sigh. Due to the waning of the Azurewood Manor and how the Azurewood Great World was facing destruction, the progeny of the Azurewood Manor, who acted as guardians of the Azurewood Great World, had begun setting up ancient arrays. But now, against external divine lords, how could the ancient arrays, that had been weathered by tens of millions of years, be able to withstand their formidable forces? In such situations, even if one could predict what would happen, there was no safe spot in the Azurewood Great World when the array formation began to disintegrate en masse. Perhaps, the only thing that would survive was the divine tree in the core of the Azurewood Great World even after the world was destroyed. The silver-haired girl did not know where she would go after the Azurewood Great World was really destroyed. Senior sister, Shu-hee was feeling guilt-stricken and she felt wronged. She knew how terrifying the apocalyptic fumes were and she had never expected it to erupt at that moment. If she had not been out gallivanting, the silver-haired girl would not have come looking for her. Even if the apocalyptic fumes erupted, they could remain safe by hiding in the Divine Tree Garden. Let's attempt to leave this place. Who could have expected this to happen, said the silver-haired girl with a shake of her head. At that moment, Yi-Yun was enveloped by the apocalyptic fumes in the sky. Was this miasma? Yi-Yun was alarmed. In a few seconds, the entire sky turned into a blur. It was definitely no ordinary miasma, for it could shield perception which he could not penetrate with. Yi-Yun conjured his protective Yuan Qi and isolated himself from the miasma, but what followed made Yi-Yun's heart drop. His protective Yuan Qi was rapidly being corroded by the miasma, which seemed to contain a toxic poison. Even with his foundations, the miasma made him struggle to maintain his protective Yuan Qi. Yi-Yun hesitated for a moment before casually throwing a tiny sword into the miasma. The sword was enveloped by the miasma and immediately, it lost its spiritual alacrity and quickly lost its luster from the corrosion. It was very powerful. Yi-Yun was alarmed. He could not figure out why the toxic gases in the marsh were so powerful. The outcome would be unimaginable if his Yuan Qi was depleted while he remained here. The miasma in the sky is denser. I'll land on the ground first before leaving as fast as possible. With such a thought, Yi-Yun had landed. Iyun saw the silver-haired girl not far away from him, while she too noticed Iyun. They were about a dozen steps apart from each other, but their figures were shrouded by the apocalyptic fumes, causing them to turn into blurry hazes. The silver-haired girl had also conjured a hazy protective Yuan Qi. Her expression looked solemn. "Is this miasma?" Iyun inquired. In the marsh, when fey beasts or fey trees died, their remains would rot into the mud, turning into toxic rotting gases. That was what miasma was. Typically, the stronger the dead fey beast was, the more powerful the miasma was. It would not be an oddity if a Dao Palace Realm warrior died from the poison. But miasma was an entity without thought after all. One would be fine as long as one was careful enough to not absorb it. Iyun had never heard of miasma of a particular marsh being so powerful to blot out the sky and land. It even shrouded the sun. The silver-haired girl hesitated for a moment before answering, "It's not miasma. Miasma is a result of the rotting gases produced after fey beasts or trees die. But the black fog in front of us is something that we call apocalyptic fumes. It's the rotting gases of a world when it dies. It's not something that miasma can be compared to." "What? The gases after a world dies?" Iyun was given a shock. It was understandable that rotting gases would be produced after plants and animals died, but he never expected that a world would also produce gases when it died. How terrifying would the gases produced be when a large world rotted in death? It was completely unimaginable, but it was not odd that it could blot out the sky and land. How expansive is the apocalyptic fumes? No idea. It might be thousands of miles, tens of thousands of miles, or even hundreds of thousands of miles. The Azurewood Great World is already on the brink of destruction. This gases of the rotting world had been repressed in the deep recesses of the large world, and it can be said to be endless. I have no idea how much seeped out either. As the silver-haired girl spoke, she gave Iyun an empathetic glance. She knew that Iyun would definitely die if he stayed behind. Ignoring the fact that he was a warrior at the half-step Dao manifestation realm, even a 7 or 8 floor Dao Palace realm warrior would probably be reduced to bones in the apocalyptic fumes and dying in a god-forsaken land. This was the might of the heavens and earth. It was not somewhere that one could leave because of having great talent. The silver-haired girl found it unbearable. From the reaction of him wanting to save Chu He previously, she knew that he wasn't an evil person. Furthermore, he was extremely intelligent, and with his half-step Dao manifestation realm, he had managed to see through Chu Yi's trap. It was truly deserving of praise, but unfortunately, he was likely to die. The silver-haired girl said, "Follow us, and there might be a chance for you to persist on for a period of time." Iyun hesitated for a moment, but he eventually chose to walk over. The gases that resulted from a rotting world had truly broadened his horizons. Felicitous Rain Lord had warned him previously that the Azurewood Great World was extremely dangerous and to consider it seriously before coming. However, Iyun had still chosen to come. He did not wish to give up on this one chance. But from the looks of it, even Felicitous Rain Lord had probably underestimated the danger of the Azurewood Great World. Who could be sure what would happen in a world that was on the brink of destruction? "Can you tell me who you are?" Iyun asked the silver-haired girl. He felt that she knew too many things. The gases of a rotting world was something that even Felicitous Rainlord might not have known. Chapter 1002, Black Winds. The silver-haired girl knew that her reactions towards the apocalyptic fumes made the youth suspicious. However, she was unsure if she could even come out of this alive, so she did not care about it. She ignored Iyun's question and said instead, "After the apocalyptic fumes start, it will constantly increase for the next 4 hours. After 4 hours, the atrocity of the apocalyptic fumes might be 100 times worse than it is now." The silver-haired girl's words made Iyun's heart sink. 100 times worse? If what the silver-haired girl said was true, it was impossible for him to withstand it then. Winds are about to blow. The silver-haired girl's expression was grim. The apocalyptic fumes would stir black winds, and one could tell how powerful the apocalyptic fumes would be from the intensity of the black wind. Just as the silver-haired girl finished speaking, they heard the wind howling. It sounded like the wailing of ghosts and the howling of wolves. The concentrated fumes interwove together as they began to spin, forming black ink like squalls. The winds were 1,000, if not 10,000 times, more terrifying than the winds that Yi Yun had seen back at the Azure Billow's Black Wind Valley. The black wind howled, and it began to release a barrage of attacks on Yi Yun's protective Yuan Qi. The squalls condensed into savage black dragons that snarled and bit at him. All of us should stay close together. The silver-haired girl pulled Chu Yi's hand and took the initiative to close the gap between herself and Yi Yun. As for the blue snake and the black blood vine in the marsh, they were put in a spirit beast bag by Chu Yi. The three gathered together, while the silver-haired girl and Yi Yun propped up their protective Yuan Qi together. Yi Yun was slightly surprised when he noticed how powerful the silver-haired girl's strength was. The girl was only at the beginning stages of the Dao manifestation realm, a level just slightly higher than his, but her true essence was extremely plentiful. The silver-haired girl's Yuan Qi had a tinge of perpetual regeneration. Regardless of how much the black winds consumed her Yuan Qi, she was able to withstand it. That's impressive. Is that the laws of life and death? Yi Yun thought secretly to himself. Yi Yun was seldom impressed by people whose cultivation levels were only slightly higher than his, but now, the silver-haired girl's nomological powers had broadened Yi Yun's horizons. The world is large. There are heavens beyond heavens and people beyond people. I still have a long way to go. Yi Yun muttered to himself. Of course, the premise was that he needed to survive the rest of today. Woo woo woo. The apocalyptic black squalls became more terrifying, but the silver-haired girl took the role of being the main force to provide the protective Yuan Qi. Her perpetual birth of energy withstood the apocalyptic black winds perfectly. But even so, Yi Yun felt like they were a tiny boat in a storm, with the possibility of them capsizing at any moment. This is the power of a world's destruction. It's truly terrifying, and not only Felicitas Rainlord, even the other divine lords and supremacies from other factions that came probably did not expect that the Azurewood Great World is so terrifying. Yi Yun guessed that the burst of the apocalyptic fumes would result in the tragic deaths of large numbers of Dao Manifestation and Dao Palace Realm warriors. Many people came to the Azurewood Great World with the intention to fish in troubled waters by killing and robbing. Many young geniuses from major sects wanted to try their luck, but now, they would probably pay the price of blood. The losses would be tragic, one that far exceeded the expectations of the major factions. Their surroundings were completely hazy, and it was difficult to discern the direction that they were moving in. One's perception was useless in the fumes, so while Yi Yun followed the silver-haired girl, he felt that everything around him looked the same. He had no idea how the silver-haired girl pinpointed the direction in which they were heading. You know the way? Yi Yun asked the silver-haired girl. However, she shook her head and said, "No, it's only a feeling. Let's hope I didn't take the wrong path." Feeling? Yi Yun was rendered speechless. It was already a problem if they could survive, but now, the direction in which they were heading could even be wrong. If their direction was incorrect and they were just walking in circles, the situation was obvious. Yi Yun pondered for a moment and he attempted to activate the purple crystal's energy vision. The energy vision was not limited by perception, so it could see far. However, Yi Yun's heart sank when he activated his energy vision. In the energy vision, the surrounding world remained a gray, hazy patch. The apocalyptic fumes was not energy at all. It was the gases of a rotting world. It was a gas that could destroy a world, much less flesh and blood. His energy vision could not discern their location, and if they really relied on a hunch, was it possible for them to survive? Yi Yun did not get his hopes up. His Yuan Qi was being quickly depleted, and the outcome would be fraught with grim possibilities if this continued. Apocalyptic fumes are also a derivation of destruction laws. If I can gain further insight from these destruction laws, I might be able to survive this desperate situation. Yi Yun muttered to himself. His destruction laws were still not perfect after all. If he had chaos laws to complement it, he would not be in such a dire state. The fumes were boundless and the black winds squalled like a massive black tsunami covered in mist. Where the three of them were was like a spot abandoned by the universe. They were alone and without help. With the passage of time, most of the burden needed to withstand the apocalyptic fumes rested on the silver-haired girl's shoulders. She was at the Dao manifestation realm after all, and she had already condensed Dao fruits. In addition to her perpetual generation of Yuan Qi, she was much better than Yi Yun in terms of energy consumption. "Sis, will we die?" asked Chu He in a whisper. Her strength was incomparable to Yi Yun's, so the amount that she contributed to the protective Yuan Qi was greatly limited. "Sis, ignore me. If it's just you alone, the Yuan Qi consumption will be lower. There will be a higher possibility of you surviving this." In the apocalyptic fumes, the more people that were protected, the greater the Yuan Qi consumption was. "Don't speak without thought." The silver-haired girl's forehead was covered in fine beads of sweat as she clenched her sister's hand tightly. The atrocity of the apocalyptic fumes far exceeded her expectations. In less than an hour, she was already finding it extremely demanding. It was almost impossible for her to survive this. Chu He worried for her sister, but she was helpless. Not only did the silver-haired girl have to protect Chu He, she also needed to protect Yi Yun. Yi Yun obviously noticed the point. He had added to the silver-haired girl's burden. Actually, Yi Yun had placed a certain amount of strength to gain insights into the destruction laws, so his contribution to the Yuan Qi protection was naturally smaller. However, gaining nomological insights was not something that could be done in a day or two. How could it be easy to gain much insight in less than an hour? Yi Yun made up his mind and said to the silver-haired girl, "If you want to survive the apocalyptic fumes, the chances of success will be lower if you take me alone." The silver-haired girl fell silent for a moment before saying, "To be in danger together and face death together is a form of fate. If we were to abandon each other at the moment of death for a sliver of hope, wouldn't it be even more lamentable when we eventually get reduced to bone?" "You are right," Yi Yun said with a smile. "I'm Yi Yun." "Yi Yun?" The silver-haired girl repeated after him before whispering, "I'm Yuingsha." "Yuingsha? I see. I have an enchanted artifact that might give us a chance to take a breather. However, my strength is limited and I'm unable to fully control it. When the time comes, it will be wrapped up in the winds, and I'll have no idea where we will fly to." Chapter 1003, Engagement. What Yi Yun was referring to was obviously the God Advent Tower. It was one of his trump cards in his expedition to the Azure Wood Great World. It had immense defenses, but its power reserves were expendable. Once it was drained, it needed a long time to recharge time, basically rendering it useless in the near future. Furthermore, the God Advent Tower was a supreme artifact at the Divine Lord level, one that Yi Yun did not want to reveal freely. This was his first encounter with Yuingsha, so he did not know her identity or background. He obviously was reluctant for her to enter the God Advent Tower, but what Yuingsha said before had moved Yi Yun. "Enchanted artifact?" Yuingsha faltered for a moment. At that moment, a tiny pagoda flew out of Yi Yun's body and spun mid-air before expanding in size. "Don't resist it." After Yi Yun said that, his body flashed and disappeared into the God Advent Tower. Yuingsha slightly hesitated, but based on the extenuating circumstances, she could not be bothered about her inhibitions. She pulled Chui's hand and flew into the God Advent Tower. Wah! A pale gold barrier surrounded the God Advent Tower and withstood the impacts of the apocalyptic fumes. The tower was blown around, colliding into anything that the winds blew it into, like a duckweed in a tsunami. Yi Yun's cultivation level was limited after all. Due to his inability to fully control the God Advent Tower, all he could do was use the array formations in the God Advent Tower to withstand the impacts. The energy reserves of the array formations were being quickly depleted due to the massive size of the God Advent Tower. The impact that it received from the apocalyptic fumes was considerably greater than what the trio received. This is. Yuangsha and Chu Yi felt the space around them warp before they appeared inside the God Advent Tower. Although the Azurewood Manor had waned, it was still an ancient and powerful sect. As the successor to the Azurewood Manor, Yuangsha was well read, so she could easily tell the value of the pagoda. Enchanted artifacts like abodes or spirit cruisers were extremely difficult to manufacture and refine. Even an extremely high-grade abode was not necessarily resilient against tempestuous attacks, so the value of an abode artifact, which could withstand the impacts of the apocalyptic fumes, was beyond imagination. When the Azurewood Manor was at its prime, it had similar artifacts, but due to an internal fracture, the artifacts were taken away by those who departed from the Azurewood Great World. What the deserters could not take away were ancient ruins that were rooted in the Azurewood Great World. Although these ancient ruins had an amazing history, it was too arduous to develop them to their full potential. Yuangsha gave Yi-Yun a deep, meaningful glance. How did this youth have a treasure of this level? Boom! The God Advent Tower was swept up by the black wind and slammed into a mountain. The mountain was immediately reduced to pieces, but the God Advent Tower's array formations remained fine despite the trio losing their footing inside the God Advent Tower. Yuangsha could not help but exclaim, "What a resilient array formation!" However, it won't be able to last long. If the energy is completely drained before the apocalyptic fumes are over, we will still be doomed, said Yi-Yun. However, he was already a lot more composed. He had a much safer environment in the God Advent Tower for him to gain insights into the destruction laws contained in the apocalyptic fumes. I couldn't tell that you were this rich, marveled Chu Yi as she clicked her tongue. She never expected that a random intruder that she wanted to scam would be so wealthy. Yi-Yun did not answer her, but instead, he caught them unaware by saying, "The both of you are probably natives of the Azurewood Great World, right?" The way that Chu Yi and Yuangsha reacted to the sudden eruption of the apocalyptic fumes made Yi-Yun generate such a guess. Although the world that they were in was on the brink of destruction, it was not unbelievable that the natives would survive. This could also explain why Chu Yi had laid a trap to ensnare others. It was only natural for natives to show animosity towards intruders. Chu Yi stuttered, momentarily unsure how to respond. She gave Yuangsha a pleading look. Yes. Yuangsha directly admitted. Yi-Yun had already revealed the secret of his God Advent Tower, so there was no need for her to conceal the fact that she was a native. Trust was interpersonal. It allowed them to have a greater chance of survival in the apocalyptic fumes. I see. Yuangsha, I have something that I want to consult you about. I wonder if you can answer me, asked Yi-Yun seriously and sincerely. What is it? My master told me that when a large world is destroyed, it is actually the birth of another large world. Is there any primordial chaos gases that exist in the Azurewood Great World? To be honest, the search for primordial chaos gases is my goal here. Primordial chaos? Yuangsha gave Yi-Yun a surprised look. Primordial chaos was a great doubt during the primordial beginnings of the universe. Even divine lords did not have a chance of encountering them, yet a junior like Yi-Yun actually wanted to make contact with the Tao of primordial chaos? Although it said that the destruction of a large world is the birth of another world, there is time involved in it that might span hundreds of millions of years. It might not be easy for you to find primordial chaos gases. When Yuangsha said that, she hesitated for a moment before saying vaguely, however. I know that in the Azurewood Great World, there is some lost ancient heritage. Amongst them, there are some things that are related to primordial chaos. Whether you can obtain them will depend on your luck. Ancient heritage? Was it the Azurewood Manor's heritage? Yi-Yun was surprised. He recalled that Felicitous Rain Lord had said that he was in search of a person during his trip to the Azurewood Great World. It was a person that Felicitous Rain Lord claimed to be near the peak of martial arts. Was this person related to the Azurewood Manor? Was he or she the lost heritage that Yuengsha had mentioned? Yun wanted to inquire further, but Yuengsha had already sat down in meditation, as though she had no intentions to speak further. Yun decided on abandoning his queries. What she told him was already very valuable. At that moment, the black winds outside the God Advent Tower were becoming more violent. The array formations of the God Advent Tower were being struck time and time again. Yun did not rest, and instead, he opened a tiny hole in the God Advent Tower's array formation. Immediately. Hum hum hum. Black apocalyptic winds surged right into the God Advent Tower and transformed into a black dragon that wanted to devour Yun. What are you doing? Shuhi was alarmed, but she saw Yun circulate all of his energy and grab at the black dragon. With a loud explosion, Yun had forcefully grabbed the black dragon, which was formed out of apocalyptic fumes, by its throat. Following that, Yun emanated an immense aura of destruction, sealing the black winds within. This aura. Shuhi looked at Yun in disbelief, as she did not have much idea of Yun's strength previously. She only found Yun's withering laws to be extremely odd, but the aura that he was emanating suddenly became domineering and horrifying. She was left dumbfounded by it. This person is very special. Shuhi muttered to herself as she watched Yun condense the apocalyptic fumes into a blob. Next, he attempted to merge the apocalyptic fumes into his body. What was he doing? Yuengsha was also astounded before she figured out what Yun's goal was. He was planning to refine the apocalyptic fumes. The aura that was emitted during a world's rotting process could cause a large world's destruction. But Yun wanted to use his own body to refine the apocalyptic fumes. Chapter 1004, No Effort Needed. The moment the apocalyptic fumes entered Yun's body, he felt his body turn cold. It was no ordinary cold feeling, it was like his very soul had been frozen tight from sleeping in a frozen catacomb for thousands of years. All the frost, decadence and death was seeping into his bones. Was this the aura that a world gave off while it rots to its death? Yun was secretly horrified. If not for him having taken the nomological path of destruction, he would have destroyed his body by recklessly absorbing the fumes. Yun calmed his heart down as he circulated his destruction Dao domain to contain the apocalyptic fumes. It struggled violently like it had a life of its own, but it was gradually refined. Yuengsha gave Yun an astonished look as she saw him devour a plume of apocalyptic fumes. Yuengsha knew better than anyone else what the apocalyptic fumes signified. To warriors, it was a lethal poison. "Sis, is that guy planning on refining the apocalyptic fumes?" asked Shuhi. Yuengsha shook her head and said, "Maybe he's just refining an artifact." Yuengsha found it unbelievable that Yun was refining the toxic fumes to enrich himself, but if he could subdue the apocalyptic fumes, it wouldn't be a surprise to use it as part of an artifact used to kill. With Yun gradually calming down, Yuengsha cast her gaze away. She had expended a great deal of her stamina that she needed to replenish desperately. The God Advent Tower continued to shuttle through the apocalyptic fumes. It was completely dark outside, and there was no way to tell the direction in which they were heading. All they could hear was howling winds that sounded like wails. There was no indication when they would depart from the vicinity of the apocalyptic fumes. The scale of the apocalyptic fumes is truly huge. A melancholic look flashed in Yuengsha's eyes. The Azurewood Great World's collapse was accelerating, and the Azurewood Manor would completely vanish along with it. The apocalyptic fumes lasted for 2 hours. In that span of time, it covered an extensive region of about 40,000 miles, where few people managed to survive. Of course, there were a tiny number of people who managed to survive resiliently. These people were lucky to survive either because of their extremely powerful cultivation levels or because they happened to be in the periphery of the apocalyptic fumes. At that moment, there were 3 feeble people in tattered clothes who were hiding in a valley. Beside them were 8 corpses strewn across the ground. Their bodies had been reduced to piles of withered bones from the corrosive forces of the apocalyptic fumes. Those who remained alive were only barely alive. If not for the apocalyptic fumes dissipating at the final moment, they probably would not have been able to last any longer. What the heck was that? An effeminate man dressed in a scarlet robe spat out a mouthful of blood. The robe that he wore was a top-grade enchanted robe, yet it had been reduced to tatters from the corrosiveness of the apocalyptic fumes. The effeminate man was the son of the Fey Phantasm sect's Taoist Yu Ming Yu Feihua. Other than the group of supremacies and divine lords that had entered the Azure Wood divine residence, Yu Feihua was one of the strongest people with his high cultivation level in the periphery zones of the Azure Wood Great World. He believed that his escapade in the Azure Wood Great World would be a breeze and that every treasure that he encountered would be his. Not a single warrior would pose a threat to him either. In the expedition to the Azure Wood Great World, Yu Feihua believed that he was definitely safe and that he would return with a great bountiful harvest. However, he never expected that a grey fog would suddenly fill the area. The strange winds in the grey fog ground people to dust or reduced them to mere bones. They had struggled to survive the storm, but they had depleted nearly all their energy reserves. Even their meridians had been damaged. We nearly lost our lives. Yu Feihua was still shaking in his wits. The terror of the Azure Wood Great World had exceeded his original expectations. He was already severely injured before he found any opportunities. And all of that was because he had the good luck to be located in the periphery of the grey fog. If the black winds were stronger in intensity or if he was in the middle of the grey fog, he would probably be a dead man. Senior brother Yu, we are already in such a tragic state. Everyone else might be dead already. We can explore the vicinity and we might find a few unlucky fellows who were desiccated by the black winds. There was no lack of people coming from large factions, so we might be able to get a windfall from them. The 2 Fey Phantasm sect disciples following Yu Feihua chimed. Although they were barely breathing, they still had their minds on treasures and opportunities that awaited them. The wealth of disciples from large factions was not to be belittled. You're right. We can search the vicinity. As Yu Feihua was speaking, he suddenly saw a beam of light streak across the sky, as though something was heading straight for the mountain range. Boom! With a loud blast, a mountain collapsed as a result of the beam colliding with it. Yu Feihua's eyes lit up. He sensed an extremely strong aura from the beam of light which stirred his greed. What is it? Yu Feihua felt excited. His intuition told him that the beam of light was a treasure and that it could even be a huge opportunity for him. Senior brother, shall we go and take a look? Or do we rest for a moment? We are still quite seriously injured, said a Fey Phantasm sect disciple. It was needless to elaborate their injuries, while Yu Feihua was severely injured as well. A large number of their meridians were damaged and they had less than 10% of their strength left. It was naturally very risky to begin searching for treasures. Yu Feihua frowned and hesitated for a moment before saying, riches are obtained from taking a risk. The aura from that beam of light is no trifling matter. If we miss it, it might be the loss of an opportunity. We are indeed like candles in the wind, but the black winds and grey smoke that suddenly stirred was way too terrifying. Excluding us, it would be a problem for others to survive, and even if they did, they would most likely be drained as well. They should be in a worse situation than us, so there's no reason to be afraid of anyone. Let's go and take a look. As Yu Feihua spoke, he took a spirit boat out of his interspatial ring. With the 2 Fey Phantasm sect disciples entering with him, they flew straight towards the beam of light. Yu Feihua was so injured that he did not even want to exert himself to fly physically. By using his spirit boat, it not only conserved his stamina, he could also consume relics during the flight and mediate. However, it would still require a considerable amount of time for him to mend his damaged meridians. Yufeihua was about 50 miles away from where the beam of light landed. The spirit boat took a few minutes to catch up to it. The two Fey Phantasm sect disciples saw the mountain that had collapsed from the impact from a distance. That looks like a pagoda? Just as the Fey Phantasm sect disciple finished speaking, they saw a golden light flash before the pagoda vanished completely. There's someone. Yufeihua sensed the auras of warriors from the collapsed mountain. With a twitch of his eyebrows, he said, "Indeed, there are still survivors in this gray fog. However, they are probably on their last breaths even if they survived." Supremacies would not stay in the periphery of the Azure-Wood Great World, so those who stayed behind were unlikely to exceed his strength. With this thought in mind, a cold beam of light flashed in Yufeihua's eyes. However, as the distance between them narrowed, Yufeihua managed to recognize the other party. It gave him a shock. "It's you? Yi Yun." After a momentary surprise, Yufeihua was fanatically pleased. "Ha ha! There was really no effort needed in finding you." Chapter 1005, Kill Him. "Follow me," said Yufeihua to his two juniors. The way that his eyes beamed when he looked at Yi Yun was like a wolf when it saw a piece of meat. The Azure-Wood Great World was huge, so Yufeihua had no idea when he would encounter Yi Yun. Now, it was sheer good luck that he had encountered Yi Yun. He knew that Yi Yun had a precious treasure on him and that it was likely at the Divine Lord grade. Such a treasure was a waste in Yi Yun's hands. If he had it, his strength would definitely increase drastically. He could even rely on the treasure to enter the core region of the Azure-Wood Great World. While Yufeihua was flying towards Yi Yun, he had put the spirit boat away. As for his juniors, they had yet to react. They were not aware that Yi Yun possessed a valuable treasure, and they were unsure as to why Yufeihua appeared so excited. At that moment, Yuengsha and Yi Yun had naturally seen Yufeihua from the God Advent Tower. Who are those people? A wary look flashed in Yuengsha's gorgeous eyes. She could sense that the outsiders were here with maleficent intent, especially the effeminate man dressed in red. "One of my enemies," said Yi Yun. He never expected to encounter Yufeihua here as well. After experiencing the apocalyptic fumes, Yufeihua was in a miserable state. The enchanted clothing that he wore was so tattered that he looked no different to a beggar. His excited expression added a sense of silliness to him. "Yi Yun, come on out and die. If you hand over all of your wealth without any fuss, I'll give you a quick and painless death." The God Advent Tower's array formation's energy was drained, so it could no longer provide any effective protection. Yufeihua thought nothing of Yi Yun. In terms of cultivation, Yi Yun was at the half-step Dao manifestation realm, 2 large realms lower than him. Yufeihua knew that Yi Yun was gifted and that he had even been accepted by Felicitas Rainlord as a personal disciple. However, no amount of talent could breach the gap of 2 large realms. It was the limit if Yi Yun could defeat a warrior at the peak Dao manifestation realm. However, he was a high-floor Dao Palace realm warrior, so it was an easy task to kill Yi Yun. "Yi Yun, come on out and die." The 2 juniors standing beside Yufeihua clamored as well. They were in terrible states as well, but they were not worried about that. Surviving that strange apocalyptic fumes was already quite an impressive feat, so how could one not be exhausted? "Yufeihua, you attempted to kill me years ago. Even if you didn't come looking for me, I would have settled the debt with you." As Yi Yun spoke, he had flown out of the God Advent Tower. Yuengsha followed closely behind. As for Chu He, Yuengsha had insisted that she remained in the God Advent Tower. "Settle the debt with me?" To have the guts to say such a bold statement despite being a mere half-step Dao manifestation realm warrior, aren't you afraid that you might end up cutting your tongue? Just as Yufeihua was halfway done with his mocking tirade of Yi Yun, his words were left stuck in his throat. He could clearly sense that Yi Yun's yuan qi fluctuations were intense, like he was not exhausted at all. Yufeihua was alarmed. He clearly saw Yi Yun fly out from the depths of the gray fog. How could he not have expended any yuan qi in such a situation? Was it that tiny pagoda that had protected him? That punk! Yu Feihua clenched his teeth. He immediately recalled how Yi Yun had survived a supremacy strike. He had originally believed that it was a particular talisman or a set of enchanted armor, but from the looks of it, it was likely the pagoda that allowed Yi Yun to survive the supremacy's blow. What sort of pagoda was it? How powerful was its defensive strength? Yu Feihua was well aware of the value that abode-type treasures had. Those treasures were something that even his father, Taoist Yu Ming, lacked one, let alone himself. Yi Yun, you are truly dumb enough to carry such a treasure on you. To flaunt it so flagrantly and use it to hide a woman, how are you going to hold on to it with your cultivation level? What a joke! A cold beam flashed in Yu Feihua's eyes. Not only was he thinking of killing Yi Yun to snatch the God Advent Tower, he was also considering if he should silence his two juniors after the matter was settled. Yi Yun shot a cold stare at Yu Feihua. This was the first time that Yi Yun was encountering a warrior with a high-floor Dao Palace realm. Yi Yun was definitely no match for a high-floor Dao Palace realm warrior if his opponent was in his prime. In terms of age, Yu Feihua was already about 800 years old, about 10 times older than Yi Yun. No amount of talent could bridge the gap of such a long period of cultivation. Yi Yun's aura gradually rose as he suddenly attacked. He did not wait for Yu Feihua to attack, and instead, he shot out like an arrow. With a sword in his hand, he thrust it straight at Yu Feihua's face. Yi Yun was acutely aware that the present Yu Feihua was in an absolutely weakened state. He obviously would not allow Yu Feihua to get time to recuperate. Ah! A golden crow shrieked as it soared into the sky. Yi Yun's strike was so fast that one could not react in time. Yu Feihua had never expected that Yi Yun did not have any thoughts of escaping while facing him. Instead, Yi Yun had taken the initiative to attack him. You are courting death. Yu Feihua roared as he joined his hands together. A guqin appeared in front of him. He plucked the guqin violently, and as its strings vibrated, sound waves blasted out like the wails of ghosts and the howls of wolves as they headed straight for Yi Yun's sword beam. Although Yu Feihua's aura had been greatly weakened, his cultivation level was still a force to be reckoned with. He was not someone that could be so easily dealt with. Yu Feihua was absolutely confident that he could kill Yi Yun without the need to sacrifice his essential lifeblood. Pang! The sword beam shattered as the sonic wave exploded. However, Yi Yun did not retreat. Instead, he converged his body and rushed straight at Yu Feihua. He threw the sword in his hand, and with a flip of his hand, he pulled out the pure Yang broken sword. The previous strike was only a feint. Yi Yun's second strike was the true death blow. Withering Sword of Time. A sword beam slashed out as it flowed like the rivers of time. The strike did not possess any destructive strength, but the powers of time that accompanied it rushed straight into Yu Feihua's body. Oh! At that instant, Yu Feihua felt a force that stemmed from the power of time. It was devouring his life force, and Yi Yun's strike was robbing him of his vitality. You are courting death. Yu Feihua was enraged as he forcefully gathered all of his energy. A piercing sound from the guqin in his hand echoed, producing sound waves that transformed into black gruesome faces of wraiths. The ghastly faces opened their mouths and tried to use their sharp teeth to bite Yi Yun. Sound of divine annihilation. Yi Yun's previous strike had injured Yu Feihua. He had pushed his offensive strength to its limits, leaving very limited defensive strength. It would be very difficult for him to defend against Yu Feihua's sound of divine annihilation. And just as the ghastly faces were about to tear Yi Yun apart, a green band flew over. It expanded like a green ocean that wrapped the black ghastly faces. Boom! With a loud explosion, the black ghastly faces exploded. Yuengsha's face turned pale as she retreated several steps back and stood beside Yi Yun. It was Yuengsha who had blocked the sound of divine annihilation for Yi Yun. Kill him! Yu Yingsha shouted. She definitely would not allow the effeminate man dressed in red to leave the place alive. Chapter 1006, Pursuit. That woman? Yu Feihua looked at Yu Yingsha in surprise. From his point of view, Yu Yingsha was only a warrior who was at the beginning stages of the Tao manifestation realm. Although her cultivation level was higher than Yi Yun's, her strength was unlikely to be Yi Yun's match. Yu Feihua did not think much of her, but he was surprised that a single strike of hers was enough to obliterate his sound of divine annihilation. Although Yu Feihua had less than 10% of his strength left, the sound of divine annihilation that he produced was not something that a warrior at the beginning stages of Tao manifestation could obliterate. What background did this woman have? Hold that woman back, I'll deal with Yi Yun, said Yu Feihua to his two juniors. Senior brother Yu. The two Fei Phantasm sect disciples were somewhat dumbfounded. They were in a worse situation than Yu Feihua, and having experienced the baptism of the apocalyptic fumes, it was already a miracle that they were still alive. How was it possible for them to continue engaging in combat? They originally believed that Yi Yun's cultivation level was very low and that he would be easily killed by them even in their dire states. Now, seeing how Yu Feihua could not gain the upper hand against the combined forces of Yi Yun and the green-dressed woman, they knew that it was impossible for them to stand a chance. Just as they were hesitating, Yu Yingsha suddenly attacked. In between Yu Yingsha's eyebrows, a red lotus imprint surfaced. The lotus imprint was constantly expanding in size before it evolved into a resplendent red lotus. At the moment that the red lotus appeared, it was like it was the only thing in the world that made it inclusive of everything. Behind Yu Yingsha, Yi Yun's heart palpitated when he saw the red lotus appear. That lotus! As the red lotus spun in the void, the scene gave Yi Yun a shock. He had previously seen a similar scene. Yi Yun, let us combine forces and take advantage of your enemy's weakest moment. Once he recovers, we will not be his match at all, said Yu Yingsha in a hurried tone. Yi Yun had no time to ponder about the lotus. Taking advantage of his enemy's perilous situation was Yi Yun's best chance at killing Yu Feihua. Yi Yun circulated the Book of Heaven's Advent to its limits before he slashed out with the pure Yang broken sword. 3-foot passage sword. Sword beams inundated Yu Feihua like roaring floods that resembled the river of time. Mid-air, the sword beam and Yu Yingsha's red lotus interweaved in an indomitable fashion. Yu Feihua's expression finally changed. With many of his meridians being damaged, how could he withstand that strike? The three of us should attack together, Yu Feihua said to his two juniors standing beside him. A cold beam suffused in his eyes. In the present situation, if he continued embroiling himself with Yi Yun and Yu Yingsha, he was bound to damage his vital essence. It might even affect his future attainments. He obviously could not accept such an outcome. By sending his two juniors forward, they could act as his shield. They would withstand Yi Yun and Yu Yingsha's frontal attack, while he could grab an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. That was the best strategy. As for the outcome of his two juniors, it was obviously not something that Yu Feihua would care about. Their deaths were none of his concern. All right. The two Fei Phantasm sect disciples agreed. They invoked the vestiges of their Yuan Qi, causing phantom shadows to appear. And just as they were about to encounter Yi Yun and Yu Yingsha's attacks, they suddenly changed directions. They spontaneously retreated towards their respective sides. In a blink of an eye, only Yu Feihua was left out of the trio. What? Yu Feihua was incensed. Senior brother Yu, hold them back first. We'll get senior sister Yao Chua for reinforcements. The two Fei Phantasm sect disciples retreated at an extremely fast speed. And at that moment, Yu Feihua could no longer afford the time to deal with them. The sword beam and red lotus were already right in front of him. Scram, all of it. The enraged Yu Feihua threw the guqin in his hands. The 7 chords of the guqin began to vibrate of their own accord as demonic sounds blasted in a way that palpitated the heart. Boom! The Guqin exploded as one of the cords snapped. The Red Lotus spun and tore through the sound blast, while Yi Yun's sword beam hurled straight through, aiming directly at Yufeihua's chest. Pwah! Blood splattered at the instant that demarcated life and death. Yufeihua had forcefully twisted his body, allowing him to dodge Yi Yun's fatal strike. However, Yufeihua still found that a large amount of his vitality had been drawn away by Yi Yun's strike. Yufeihua was burning with anger. His Yuan Qi was already drained, so there was no way that he could withstand the strange time laws. Both of you will be punished with death for extinguishing my vitality. Yufeihua bit the tip of his tongue and forcefully used the power of his essential lifeblood. With his Yuan Qi being drained, the only thing that he could use was his essential lifeblood to give him strength. Boom! Yufeihua smacked out with a palm. His white and slender palm had suddenly turned pitch black. His fingernails had devolved into ghastly claws and were accompanied by countless phantom shadows that wailed in a manner that blotted out the sky and the land. It's enough to kill the both of you with a strike powered by my essential lifeblood. Oh! Yuangsha's expression changed. She was in front of Yi Yun and the power of the strike made her heart palpitate. She knew that Yufeihua was putting up a desperate front. As the saying goes, a centipede would continue wriggling even when it's dead. Yufeihua was a high-floor Dao Palace realm warrior after all. Even at his weakest moment, he was definitely not someone that they could easily match. Phew! Yuangsha flicked her right hand, shooting a green band straight at the ghastly claws. As the Red Lotus spun, it clashed with the ghastly claws. Ka-cha! With an explosion, the Red Lotus was torn apart by the ghastly claws. The ghastly claws proceeded unopposed, hurtling straight at Yuangsha and Yi Yun. What a powerful strike! Yuangsha was shocked. She was the only one who knew how powerful the Red Lotus band that she had attacked with was. The Red Lotus mystic technique came from the Azurewood Great World's primordial ruins. The ruins had existed from a time long forgotten, even before the Azurewood Manor was established. It was also the reason for the flourishing of the Azurewood Manor. Although Yuangsha had only learned a smattering of the Red Lotus mystic technique, it was already extremely formidable. But now, she was still unable to withstand Yufeihua's attack due to the limitations of her cultivation level. At that split instant, Yi Yun moved in front of Yuangsha. He put his pure yang broken sword away and struck out with his palm. Powerful Yuan Qi gathered in Yi Yun's palm. Countless nomological fragments gathered together, forming a black wheel. Buzz! The wheel spun as it met Yufeihua's ghastly claw. 10,000 Demon Wheel of Existence. Ka-cha! With a loud explosion, the black ghastly claw was reduced to shreds by the 10,000 Demon Wheel of Existence. It exploded into a blob, and an aura of destruction emanated from it. The destructive aura constantly expanded, eventually forming a black storm. It was dissipated. Yufeihua was alarmed. The strike that he had dealt at all costs was already 20 to 30% of his strength when he was at his optimal state. Had it been blocked? Yufeihua found it unbelievable. But at that moment, he no longer had the luxury of time to think about it. He saw Yi Yun rushing at him with the pure yang broken sword back in his hand. Flee! Yufeihua no longer had any intention of continuing the battle. A wise man did not fight when the odds were against him. He was unable to enter a battle of attrition with Yi Yun, and if he used the power of his essential lifeblood, it would result in irreparable damage to his body. Yi Yun, I'll definitely dice you into pieces when I recover. Yufeihua transformed into a black beam of light and fled into the distance. A cold beam flashed in Yi Yun's eyes as he locked his mental energy onto Yufeihua. He pursued Yufeihua, for it would lead to endless trouble if Yufeihua were to flee successfully. Chapter 1007, Door to the 33 Skies. At the moment that he began his pursuit of Yufeihua, Yi Yun had released Chu He and put the God Advent Tower away. Senior sister, we. Shu He looked at Yuangsha. Yuengsha threw a band from her hand and it wrapped around Shui's waist. Help him! The two of them transformed into two streams of light that followed Yi Yun closely. Yu Feihua could sense the three auras behind him in hot pursuit. When he took a backward glance, his heart sank. From the looks of it, Yi Yun was bent on killing him. You are doomed for chasing me. Yu Feihua swiped his finger over his interspatial ring and a black pill appeared in his hand. As he looked at the pill, Yu Feihua's expression revealed a pained look. Despite feeling the pinch, he swallowed the pill after gritting his teeth. If not for the apocalyptic fumes, Yi Yun would not be his match in any way if he remained in his optimal state. But now, Yu Feihua had swallowed the black divine pill. Despite flying at high speeds, he could still rapidly restore his stamina. Furthermore, the pill could heal the injuries in his meridians. And as long as he recovered 30% of his stamina, Yu Feihua was confident that he could easily annihilate Yi Yun. Yi Yun, he's recuperating, said Yuengsha anxiously. She too was feeling nervous. Yu Feihua was not easy to deal with, so they could not give Yu Feihua the time to recuperate. Yi Yun frowned. Although Yu Feihua was injured, he was still extremely fast. The pursuit was physically demanding for Yi Yun, but if he failed to chase up in time, it would be troublesome once Yu Feihua recovered his stamina. He thought of the three-sword chi that Felicitous Rain Lord had bestowed to him. If they were used, it would likely be able to kill Yu Feihua, but Yi Yun was in a dilemma. He had only been in the Azure Wood Great World for less than a day's time. He had yet to encounter any opportunities, but he had already drained the God Advent Tower's array of its energy reserves. If he were to use Felicitous Rain Lord's sword chi, he would have used all of his trump cards. He expected to stay in the Azure Wood Great World for a prolonged period of time. It had yet to begin in full force, but his trump cards were all gone. What was he to do in the future? Just as Yi Yun was pondering over his dilemma, he suddenly realized something was amiss. Why was the sky dark? The Azure Wood Great World sky was always a hazy patch. The sun was an ashen color, but it was still able to barely scatter its dim rays of sunlight, but now. Yi Yun looked up and saw that clumps of viscous darkness filled the sky. The sun looked like it had been devoured, vanishing into thin air. What's wrong? Yi Yun was alarmed. The Azure Wood Great World, which was on the brink of death, was weird in every way. The apocalyptic fumes had left Yi Yun with a lingering fear, and now by encountering such a phenomena, it made Yi Yun have a sense of foreboding. The Azure Wood Great World was a lot more dangerous than he had previously imagined. What is happening? Yi Yun looked at Yuengsha. As a native of the Azure Wood Great World, Yuengsha most likely knew what was happening. However, Yi Yun never expected Yuengsha to look perplexed as she said, "I do not know." Subconsciously, Yuengsha had slowed down. In the Azure Wood Great World, the greatest threat did not stem from enemies like Yu Feihua, but the Azure Wood Great World itself. In this dying world, it would drag others along in its destruction. Sis, look there. Shuhi revealed a horrified look. As she spoke, she pointed to the sky, which Yi Yun looked towards. He saw a startling scene. Yi Yun saw that the viscous-looking darkness in the sky was gathering towards the distant horizons before finally flowing down like a black river of darkness. And the mouth of the dark river was a vast abyss. The abyss was immense in size and it seemed to look like black burning flames. The river of darkness spewed down from the heavens and flowed straight into the abyss that looked like it was the source of darkness in the world. On careful look, Yi Yun could vaguely see streams of light in the river of darkness. They looked like treasures, mystic manuals, and rare materials. These things were soaked in the river of darkness while being swept into the deep abyss. What's that? Yi Yun was astonished. When he previously came to the Azure Wood Great World, he had an overview of the world from a high altitude. Although the Azure Wood Great World was on the brink of destruction, he had never seen the abyss despite all sorts of strange phenomena taking place. It should be said that he had not seen the deep abyss when he engaged in battle with Yu Feihua. Could it be that the deep abyss had just appeared out of nowhere? Could it be? Yuengsha suddenly thought of something as her expression changed. What? Yi-Yun looked at Yuengsha. Although Yuengsha had an unsightly expression, she suddenly refused to elaborate even though she clearly knew something. Seeing the black abyss approaching them, Yi-Yun activated the purple crystal's energy vision. His heart chilled when he realized what he was seeing. The multifarious treasures that he saw in the River of Darkness were not treasures in the energy vision. They were innumerable withered bones of primordial beasts. They had lost all of their spiritual energy and were fully decayed. They bobbed in the River of Darkness before disappearing upon entry into the abyss along with the river's flow. Withered bones? This scene made Yi-Yun slow down. Yi-Yun, you. Yuengsha slowed down as well as she looked at Yi-Yun. Yi-Yun said with a sullen expression, "What is that place?" "I can see many withered bones of primordial beasts being swept into the abyss with the River of Darkness." "You can see it?" Yuengsha was alarmed. Yuengsha had only read some records regarding the Azurewood Great World's ancient abyss in the books of the Azurewood Manor. She had never expected that Yi-Yun could see through the illusion from outside. "Actually, I'm unable to recognize it either. It probably is finally reenacting what happens when the Azurewood Great World faces destruction, coupled with the destruction of certain array formations." Yuengsha stopped her sentence midway. It was equivalent to not saying anything. She gave Yi-Yun an apologetic look. It was not that she was deliberately hiding things from him, but due to the rules of the Azurewood Manor, these were things that even Shuhei did not know. As the successor of the Azurewood Manor, Yuengsha had sworn to keep these a secret. Reenact? Yi-Yun felt his heart being stirred. He could see that Yu Feihua had arrived in front of the abyss. Yu Feihua was clearly shocked when facing the sudden appearance of the abyss. The abyss gave off a redoubtable aura that made Yu Feihua hesitate for a moment. He was tempted when he saw the treasures immersed in the River of Darkness. However, Yu Feihua had a hunch that these treasures were not easily obtainable. Although they had appeared in front of him, it was not impossible that it was a trap. However, the expedition to the Azurewood Great World was a search for rare encounters. Now, with such a rare occurrence appearing suddenly in front of him, how could Yu Feihua not be moved when he saw so many treasures? Even if there was a trap, he had to vie for the opportunities in front of him. If not, how was he to climb up to the peak of martial arts when it was a path fraught with difficulties? Upon thinking about that, Yu Feihua turned to glance at Yi-Yun. With a provocative smile, his figure flashed as he entered the abyss. Yi-Yun did not choose to follow and instead looked at Yuengsha. Even though Yuengsha was reluctant to mention certain things, she would at least inform him about the dangers of the abyss. Yuengsha took a deep breath before saying, "The Red Lotus mystic technique that you saw me use was a technique that the founder of the Azurewood Manor brought out from the abyss. The founder named the abyss the door to the 33 skies. Our Azurewood Manor has a saying that has been passed down for generations that once one enters the door to the 33 skies, it is almost impossible to return. Back then, even a divine lord had died in it." A divine lord had died in there? Yi-Yun's brows pricked up. He had similar guesses and now his suspicions were confirmed. Yuengsha was a descendant of the Azurewood Manor, and the Azurewood Manor had been in the slumps for eons. From the information that Felicitous Rain Lord had told him, Yi-Yun was of the impression that the Azurewood Manor had been destroyed. He never expected that the Azurewood Manor still had descendants. If a divine lord can die, how is it possible for the mystic technique to be taken out? Could it be that your Azurewood Manor had many divine lords? Chapter 1008, Beneath the Abyss. Yi-Yun knew that the Azurewood Manor was an impressive seclusive sect. It was unfathomable at its prime, but even so, it was impossible for it to have many divine lords early in its establishment. The entire 10,000 Fey Empyrean heaven only had a few dozen divine lords after all. If a divine lord could die, who could bring the items out of the door to the 33 skies? Yuengsha said, back then, there were dozens of people who entered the door to the 33 skies. One of them was a divine lord. That divine lord ancestor died in the door to the 33 skies, and only 3 people managed to come out of the door to the 33 skies. They were all below the realm of supremacies. Furthermore, the person who brought the Red Lotus manual was a Tao Manifestation Realm warrior. His cultivation level was only a sub-realm higher than mine. Tao Manifestation Realm? Yi Yun was stunned. In an abyss where a divine lord had died, it was the Tao Manifestation and Tao Palace Realm warriors that had managed to survive it. What could be the reason for that? Yuengsha guessed what was on Yi Yun's mind. She shook her head and said, "Don't look at me. I don't know why either. It has likely to do with how the door to the 33 skies is a strange place to begin with. The level of one's cultivation level either has no direct correlation with whether one would survive, or there is a very minute relationship. And back then, the sect had probed the door to the 33 skies multiple times, with a tiny bit of it being affirmed every time. Eventually, the sect only let Tao Manifestation Realm warriors enter. Many people had died in it, with very few of them managing to come out of it. These probings happened until the door to the 33 skies disappeared. During that period, the Azurewood Manor gained a great deal from it, but over eons, the door to the 33 skies had never appeared again. When Yuengsha said that, she let out a light sigh. As a descendant of the Azurewood Manor, she knew very well that it had a sanguine history during its nascent development. Many of the disciples that entered the door to the 33 skies did not do so voluntarily. I understand. As Yi Yun said that, he slowly approached the abyss's entrance. You're going in? Asked Yuengsha. Or else? Yi Yun returned with a question. Since the door to the 33 skies was not an area of land that guaranteed death, Yi Yun had the intention of exploring it. Most critically, the Red Lotus mystic technique had given Yi Yun many mental connections. He had once seen a strange woman that had something to do with such a Red Lotus. Under such circumstances, Yi Yun naturally did not want to miss out on an opportunity to probe its secrets. Chu He, you stay behind. Yuengsha said to Chu He. Sis, you're going in as well? Chu He guessed Yuengsha's thoughts. The Azurewood Great World was about to be destroyed. With the door to the 33 skies appearing once again, as the successor of the Azurewood Manor, Yuengsha had the intention of making a risky gamble. Sis, I do not want to stay outside. It's not like it's safe outside either. Chu He said to Yuengsha. The second half of her statement was most likely effective as Yuengsha hesitated for a moment before nodding. You can enter the God Advent Tower. Yi Yun released the God Advent Tower and allowed Chu He to enter it. Following that, he and Yuengsha flew straight towards the door to the 33 skies. As they approached it, it was astounding for them to see the door to the 33 skies up close. The abyss was like a world that had been cleaved off. The face of the abyss looked like the endless cosmos, while the river of darkness in the sky was expansive as it surged into the abyss before vanishing. As for the countless treasures in the river of darkness, they were only phantoms or illusions. They besotted others, but like castles in the air, they were within sight but beyond reach. Why is the abyss named the door to the 33 skies? Yi Yun stood at the entrance to the abyss and looked at the endless darkness. For some baffling reason, all of the blood in his body began to surge at an increased speed. It's from the records left behind in canons. The sect only has a few guesses. Let's go in. As Yi Yun spoke, his figure plunged into the abyss. He and Yuengsha quickly descended for an unknown period of time. Being proficient in the laws of time, Yi Yun could sense that time in the abyss flowed at a different rate. It felt like he had entered a brand new world. The Black River flowed with stirring specter energy. Yi Yun did not know how far he had descended when he abruptly felt like he had penetrated a distorted space. Immediately following that, what he saw changed. He realized that he had arrived in an underground world. It was not pitch black like he imagined, but it was an overcast world. The ground was littered with gray rocks and there were black clouds floating in the sky. It was apparently those clouds that they had penetrated previously. Iyun overlooked the world and spread out his perception, but he did not detect Euphra's location. It was unknown where he had gone despite entering first. This made Iyun secretly turn alert. Boom! Iyun landed on the ground and crushed a rock. A layer of gray powder was stirred up. Only then did Iyun realize that the layer of powder was somewhat soft. It was about an inch thick and there was whiteness amid the grayness. Beneath the grayish-white powder was black rock. Standing on this piece of land, Iyun felt a baffling chill. It was like he had come to a cemetery. Iyun took a few steps forward and heard a light crack as if he had crushed something to bits. He looked down and saw a piece of broken bone. It had been crushed into powder by him and the fragments became part of the grayish-white powder. Iyun immediately understood that the reason why the area was grayish-white was due to the layer of bone dust accumulated over the black rock. And it was because of that reason that the area appeared eerie. It made one's soul feel like it was entombed in ice. It was hard to imagine what sort of history this piece of land had in order to accumulate so much bone dust. This must be White Bone Ridge. I've seen it in the sex books. The bone dust is not left behind by members of my Azure Manor. It was already here, to begin with. Yuangsha said, which made Iyun's mind stir. Does the Azure Manor have a map to the door to the 33 skies? Yuangsha hesitated for a moment before nodding. She said, back when the sect probed the door to the 33 skies multiple times, it obtained much valuable information regarding the door to the 33 skies at the cost of sacrificing many lives. And all of this information was collated by an elder who had entered the door to the 33 skies several times. He was proficient in Taoist arts. He had drawn a map for the door to the 33 skies and using his Taoist arts, he analyzed the danger of every area in the map. That elder's cultivation level did not exceed the level of supremacy eventually. He once said that the door to the 33 skies was once another world. It might be that it is an entrance to the 10,000 Fey Empyrean heaven from another completely different world. It just so happened that the entrance opened up in the Azure Wood Great World. Yuangsha's words left Iyun astonished. The door to the 33 skies was a name recorded in ancient canon. Since it was given the name of a door, it was completely reasonable that it was the entrance to another world. Upon thinking about this, Iyun had a deep sense of how tiny he was. The world was majestic and it exceeded his imagination in every way. Oh! Someone is coming down. Yuangsha said abruptly. Iyun looked up and saw the dark clouds overhead break apart. A bunch of figures flew straight down. Iyun's eyes turned cold as he clenched his pure yang broken sword tightly. Chapter 1009, Marquis Wu Yun, Danger. The group of people numbered about 20. They were dressed in different attires and were of all ages. It was apparent that they belonged to different factions. Some of the most striking ones amongst them were a lady with black fingernails and a middle-aged man that looked like a Taoist, as well as a purple-robed man whose face was covered in scales. The scale-faced purple-robed man caught Iyun's attention the most. He was not greatly injured and it was hard to tell if he had experienced the apocalyptic fumes. If he had been embroiled in the apocalyptic fumes, even if it were just the periphery, it was enough to indicate how formidable he was. Few people could survive the apocalyptic fumes relatively unscathed. But compared to these people, there were another two people who caught Iyun's attention. They were a fat and thin duo that Iyun noticed with a cursory glance. Shi Fei. Shi Ping. Pang Pang Pang. The group of 20 people landed one after another. Shi Fei and Shi Ping had also seen Iyun. As the saying goes, enemies see red at the moment they meet. Their Dao domains were destroyed back when they competed with Yun to become Felicitous Rain Lord's disciple. Their martial paths had been almost severed by Yun. The first thing that they did when they saw Yun was to circulate their energy, producing intense killing intent. How true it is that enemies often cross each other's paths. When Shifei and Shiping saw Yun, they revealed a hideous smile. After their martial paths had been severed, the statuses that they enjoyed in the Immortal Rain sect had plummeted. They had no choice but to receive the patronage of a powerful figure in the Immortal Rain sect, to the point of them being almost no different to slaves. Only then did they manage to survive in the Immortal Rain sect. They embarked on the expedition to the Azurewood Great World with the intentions to go for broke while risking their lives. If they were able to find a heaven-defying treasure in the Azurewood Great World, there was a tiny bit of possibility that they could reverse their fates, allowing them to continue down their martial paths. But they had never expected to encounter Yun here. To them, Yun was a thorn in their side, a sty in their eyes. They yearned to skin him alive. So it's the two of you. To think that the two of you would come to the Azurewood Great World. Is there any meaning for your trip here, considering that your Dao have already been destroyed? As Yun spoke, he circulated the energy in his Dantian, which had the 3 sword chi that Felicitous Rain Lord had bestowed to him. That was the last thing he could rely on. But even with the sword chi, Yun did not have absolute confidence when facing a true expert. You're courting death. The eyes of Shifei and Shiping suffused a deep sense of vicious hatred. Although they yearned to immediately kill Yun, they lacked the confidence to do so due to the severe injuries that they had suffered from before, in addition to the apprehension they felt towards Yun. At that moment, Shifei and Shiping suddenly turned around and bowed to a person in the group. Lord Marquis Wu Yun, the two of us implore Lord Marquis Wu Yun to kill that person for the two of us. The two of us will swear on the heavens that we will be dedicated to the Lord, never to balk at any sacrifice, even at the costs of our lives. Bows amongst warriors had various forms: simple cupping of hands, a junior's bow, a bow between master and disciple, as well as the genuflection that was typically seen between master and slave. And now, Shifei and Shiping's act of deference was the latter. This surprised Yun slightly. For Shiping and Shifei to be sent by the Immortal Rain sect to participate in Felicitous Rain Lord's disciple recruitment, it proved that they enjoyed a particular status in the Immortal Rain sect. Even if it had plummeted as a result of their Dao domains being destroyed, they should still have a certain amount of remnant pride. But now, they had submitted to someone else. It made it apparent that Marquis Wu Yun was no trifling figure in the Immortal Rain sect. Are you Yun? Marquis Wu Yun, who Shiping and Shifei begged, was the man in the purple robes. He was burly and his cheeks were covered with a layer of scales. Even in the overcast world, the layer of scales still shimmered with a resplendent luster. He could not be considered handsome, but he exuded a special charm that made him unforgettable to anyone who saw him. Was it you who previously crippled Shiping and Shifei? Marquis Wu Yun's words suffused an oppressive pressure. It stemmed from his terrifying strength, a cultivation level that Yun could not discern at all. He was from the Immortal Rain sect, where he enjoyed a supernatural existence. That meant that he had immense talent, or at least it exceeded Shifei and Shiping's. In addition to his cultivation level that exceeded Yun by 2 large realms, he was absolutely someone that Yun could not deal with. That's right. Yun focused intently. Even though he had Felicitous Rain Lord's sword chi, he did not have much confidence. After all, he could only produce a tiny portion of the might of Felicitous Rain Lord's sword chi. He was unsure how useful it would be against such a mighty figure. Marquis Wu Yun took a few steps towards Yun. Although he was looking at Yun, it was like everything was beneath his notice. He completely disparaged Yun. Yun. Yuangsha, who was beside Yun, was feeling extremely nervous. She had never expected that they would encounter danger at the moment that they entered the door to the 33 skies. She was too weak, so she would not amount to anything against the group of people. And Yi Yun's trump card, the God Advent Tower, had previously been drained of its energy. Shi Ping and Shi Fei are now under my patronage. In the future, they will be my servants, but I would still like to give them an answer. As Felicitous Rain Lord's disciple, I will spare you from death, but I will not let you off either. Back when you participated in Felicitous Rain Lord's disciple recruitment, you had made Shi Ping and Shi Fei choose between kneeling down or slapping themselves in the face. Today, I'll let you experience that choice. Either you kneel down to beg for their forgiveness or you slap yourself in the face 100 times. Make your choice. Although Marquis Wu Yun spoke in a nonchalant manner, his tone was not something to be reposted. Absolute strength made him believe that he was free to determine Yi Yun's fate. The mood changed dramatically as the air turned tense with a murderous hint to it. Everyone was looking at Yi Yun, with many of them having gloating looks. Since they were in a group, a lot of them were from the Immortal Rain sect. As Immortal Rain sect disciples, they were displeased with Felicitous Rain Lord, who had betrayed their sect. With Yi Yun being Felicitous Rain Lord's personal disciple, they were also jealous of him because of the possibility of him eventually inheriting Felicitous Rain Lord's 10,000 Fey Divine Canon. They yearned for Yi Yun's death. Marquis Wu Yun did not choose to kill Yi Yun immediately because of the people present. It was difficult to keep the murder of Yi Yun a secret. This made him somewhat hesitant, but it was also impossible for him to spare Yi Yun. Lord, just kneeling or slapping himself in the face? That's too little. Shi Ping and Shi Fei turned anxious. They had their future martial paths destroyed, so there was no way that they could ease the hatred that they had for Yi Yun unless they tortured him to death. Shut up! Marquis Wu Yun frowned. This made Shi Ping and Shi Fei immediately feel apprehensive. They did not dare speak to another word. Now, they were only servants, and similarly, Marquis Wu Yun did not think much of them either. Lord, Yi Yun has many treasures on him. Rumor has it that one of the treasures is close to the Divine Lord level, said Shi Fei through gritted teeth after a moment of silence. He did not say it with a voice transmission, but right in front of the 20 people. Immediately, everyone looked at Yi Yun with an odd glint in their eyes. A treasure close to the Divine Lord level. In fact, Shi Fei did not know what level Yi Yun's treasures were at. However, he had deliberately said it in such a manner. It was simple but also very vicious. By mentioning Yi Yun's treasure, the 20 people would target Yi Yun like a pack of wolves catching sight of a sheep. It was obvious what the sheep's outcome would be. He did not believe that Yi Yun would survive the group's attacks when greed leered its head. Chapter 1010, Deadly Situation. Oh! I never expected you to possess such tremendous wealth. Marquis Wu Yun sized Yi Yun up. In the Immortal Rain sect, he was no longer considered part of the younger generation. Once Immortal Rain sect disciples from the younger generation matured and became powerful enough, they were conferred with various noble titles. A title like Marquis was one of the highest ranks, thus, his powerful strength was evident. However, even though Marquis Wu Yun had a promising future, he only had a top supremacy level item when it came to treasures. It was a treasure that was exceedingly close to the Divine Lord level, so he was naturally tempted when he heard about Yi Yun's wealth. The others had similar intentions as well. Their wealth was incomparable to Marquis Wu Yun's. Everyone who came to the Azure Wood Great World came in search for opportunities. But from the present situation, it appeared as though the Azure Wood Great World was not a land littered with treasures as they imagined. During their search, not only did they fail to obtain anything, they had also faced all sorts of danger. The apocalyptic fumes had left them with a lingering fear. They had been lucky to be situated in the periphery of the apocalyptic fumes, otherwise, they would have been reduced to ash. With a mere half-step down manifestation realm cultivation level, that Yi Yun is no different to an ant. Yet, he has such valuable treasures. What a fool! Many people leered at Yi Yun with all sorts of thoughts. From their point of view, Yi Yun was like a savory piece of meat. They did not think much of Yi Yun's resistance, but there were two things that were a little trickier. Firstly, Yi Yun's master was Felicitous Rain Lord, who made them apprehensive. The other reason was the problem of splitting the treasure amongst 20 people after killing him. Marquis Wu Yun, if you were to do anything to Yi Yun, White Brows, will not say a thing. I can swear on the heavens that it will not be leaked. Felicitous Rain Lord will not learn of this either, said an old man whose white brows reached his ears. He blinked his eyes, with a teasing look in them. He exuded a strange aura, and he was the only elderly person amongst the 20 people. Yuingsha's heart sank when she saw the old man. Her intuition told her that the old man was not an enemy to be trifled with. Warriors had the greatest potential when in their youth. Some would even cultivate all the way to the level of a supremacy in one fell swoop. However, once their potential was expended, their cultivation level would hardly progress, even with a lifespan that spanned millions of years. But such people would dedicate time and effort to raise their combat strength through other means when they knew that they had no future in further cultivation. For example, they would employ things like puppets, poison, or formation arrays. The old man wasn't striking, but the strange aura that he exuded made Yuingsha have some reserved fears. They were not his match. Yi Yun. Yuingsha transmitted her voice to Yi Yun. Her voice was somewhat anxious. Although she was unafraid of death, she was the successor of the Azure Wood Manor. She shouldered the mission of making the Azure Wood Manor prosper again. Even though she was likely destined to never accomplish it, she did not wish to die in the place that they were in. Yi Yun did not reply because he was fully concentrated on something else. His thoughts were interfaced with the 3 sword chi in his dantian that Felicitous Rain Lord had given him. His energy vision was scanning his surroundings. He knew that even if he released the 3 sword chi simultaneously, it was impossible for him to defeat the enemies in front of him. Yi Yun only planned on using the 3 sword chi in a bid to carve a route of escape from his dire situation. However, just as Yi Yun was searching for an opportunity to flee, he suddenly saw unusual points of light in the purple crystal's energy vision. The points of light were buried beneath the soil. They were sparkling like stars, suffusing rainbow colors on the surface. They looked like unusually beautiful gems buried underground. If not for him using his energy vision, Yi Yun would not have discovered their existence. What were they? Yi Yun was baffled. The rainbow points of light effused a chilly aura. When he penetrated the ground with his mental perception in an attempt to probe the points of light, Yi Yun felt his soul see hurt. The rainbow points of light rumbled, as though they had awoken from a deep and long slumber. Yuingsha, do you know what's in White Bone Ridge? Yi Yun inquired quickly with a voice transmission. Yuingsha faltered for a moment before replying with a voice transmission, I'm not sure. The records of White Bone Ridge in the sect only mention a large amount of bone ash. Although the Azure Wood Manor had records regarding the door to the 33 skies, the information was not detailed. There were many regions that were not completely explored. However, Yuingsha's words made Yi Yun generate several guesses. Bone ash, could it be? A sudden thought made Yi Yun's heart palpitate. Old man White Brow. What talk is that? You swear upon the heavens to egg me to kill that punk? Marquis Wu Yun laughed. He knew very clearly that White Brow's swearing upon the heavens to keep it a secret meant that Felicitous Rain Lord would not know that he had killed Yi Yun in the immediate future. And as time passed, Felicitous Rain Lord might forget this matter. After all, a half-stepped-down manifestation realm disciple was not necessarily important to a divine lord. You want to kill him using my hand? The treasure is split amongst us, but the risk of offending Felicitous Rain Lord is borne by me? That's a great plan of yours. Marquis Wu Yun said sarcastically. Immediately, he looked at Yi Yun and said, Punk, I do not intend to kill you. Know what's good for yourself and turn over your interspatial ring to me. I'll spare you if you remove the mental imprint and kneel down before Shiping and Shifei to apologize with a kowtow. Marquis Wu Yun's words were overbearing, but at that moment, the man in the Taoist outfit walked beside Yi Yun. He said with a smile, "Young man, hand me your interspatial ring and I can guarantee your safety." "You should give it to me instead." Another person stood forward, the woman with black fingernails. Be it intentional or not, all of them released their auras. The stifling feeling that they emitted was like there were powerful beasts lurking in their bodies. However, when these auras emanated, the rousing of the dots of light became even more obvious. It seems like they have awoken. Yi Yun was in full concentration as he circulated his mental energy to its limits. He injected it deep underground and constantly stimulated the points of light. The vibrations of the points of light turned more intense and slowly, green-colored eyes seemed to light up underground. They are awake. Yi Yun held his breath. Phew! 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 Large swaths of rainbow-colored dots of light drilled towards the surface rapidly. These points of light only used a few seconds to reach the ground beneath the group's feet from a half a kilometer underground. Yi Yun had discovered that other than him having his energy vision, no one present had detected the approaching points of light. The points of light lurked just inches away like they were gathering strength. At that moment, Yi Yun suddenly laughed. Despite being surrounded by 20 people, with many of them far exceeding his strength, Yi Yun's laugh had surprised everyone. "Why are you laughing when death is knocking at your door?" Marquis Wu Yun frowned. He liked it when his enemies were horrified because of his might, but he did not like such people who he could not control. Now, Yi Yun was clearly in a dire situation, but the smile on his face did not look like it was faked.